So today we discuss Italy in games and games in Italy. Thanks to Luca again for the presentation. We take a look at the images of the nation and the rise of the national industry in Italy. And I must say that when we talk about video games or digital games, we're talking about a medium which is now in its fifth decade, roughly speaking. It's entering its fifth decades as a form of popular entertainment. So when we discuss the Italian video game industry, that can take several meanings, I think. So if you think of what Hickson argued about the notion, of the national cinema, you can look at the Italian video game industry as the industry that made games in Italy, and so that would be slightly different than discussing games played in Italy and imported from elsewhere, so produced in other countries. When we look at the history of gaming in Italy, therefore, you have what we might call a national or nationalist history, of which a game like Dylan Dog might be an example from the 1990s. But you also have a history of international relevance. If you think about more recent games such as Mario & Rabbids, which is a co-production between Nintendo and Ubisoft Milan and Paris, I think, which uses characters from Nintendo, and it's actually a co-production which has an international distribution and impact. So if you look at Dylan Dog, it's that kind of history, and if you look at Mario & Rabbids, that could take another form. What we try and do today is discuss this, and also the way that Italy in itself has been consumed in games, through a series of elements of typicality, which involve Renaissance and other quite renowned ways of looking at Italy that we're quite familiar with.
What are the future directions that we're looking at in terms of research on the Italian video games in all of the senses that we have tried to explore today, although briefly? The first is, of course, broadening the historical scope, because we sort of have gotten to the point where we kind of know a lot about video games in Italy up until maybe the mid-1990s. Then with the decline of the industry, things get way more complicated in a way, and so there's some work to be done there. The second is the research about the Italian video game industry as part of the digital media industries in Italy. So how sort of the video game industry relates to other industries in the digital media landscape, but also with traditional media, as we have seen, sort of the publishing industry and newsstands especially had a very significant role in the development of the Italian video game industry. So one area of research would be to explore that, how, for example, Simulmondo and Bonelli came into contact, what kind of contracts were struck and what kinds of deals were made. And finally, of course, the sort of social and political discourses of video games in Italy. We all know that video games have a wealth of social and political discourses that come with the territory in a way. There's stigma around gaming. There's sort of the typical exclusionary kind of attitude of gamers towards essentially whoever is not a gamer. There's a number of things that can be discussed and can be discussed within the framework of Italy specifically. So these are the areas that we're looking at for the continuation of this research. This is the book that is, as Marco said, hopefully is going to be out sometime in the next month.